pleated sash for Frances now. So I've got the front sash piece right here. I've already cut it to a size. And then I prefer to actually cut instead of make marks on the fabric. But you can do either. You can either make a mark on each of these lines here, or you can go and make little slits. I just make really small little cuts in the fabric. You can kind of see it right there. I find that easier to actually fold on. But if you're nervous about just making little cuts, you can always just make marks on the fabric that align with all of these marks. Make sure that when you are doing the opposite side, you have to flip your pattern piece over. So usually what I'll do when I flip the pattern piece over is I'll go back with a marker and just mark on those lines so I can see them better. I didn't do that this time though. But you want to make sure, because the top and bottom are different on this, you want to make sure that you align the top of the pattern piece with the top of your fabric. So if your fabric is directional, well, either way, you need to ensure that the top stays on the top. So place this over here, made the marks or cuts on this side, and then I flipped the pattern piece. And then I made the cuts on this side as well. They're just really hard to see. So now that I've got all of the lines marked, I'm going to start at the top. So I'm going to start with the first two cuts. So you can see right here I've got my first two cuts. I'm going to fold the fabric wrong sides together. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this one-handed, so it looks a little wonky. But essentially I'm going to line up the cut. So both of my little snips should be aligned right there. The raw edge should be aligned. And then I'm going to come over and do the same thing on this side. So there's my cut. I'm going to line it up. So I will make, this is going to be the first pleat. So I align those little snips, and then I'm going to iron this. I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and iron this down to press it really well. So I just pressed this down so you can see it's nice and crisp. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over to where it's going to be right sides together. But I'm going to fold right on that first little cut. So right here, you can see the cut in the fabric, or if I would have marked it, that would have been where the mark is. I'm going to fold the fabric down. Sorry, let me get it all set here. Okay, so I'm going to use that cut mark as my indicator of where I need to fold the pleat. So you can see that there's the cut that tells me where I need to fold it. So I'm going to fold it right there. I'm going to come over here, find my little cut mark right there. I'm going to fold it right there. I'm going to take this back to the iron and press this pleat down. Okay, so if everything went as planned, then this pleat should be a 1/2 inch deep all the way across. So you can see right there, it's a 1/2 inch. Come down a little bit further. I usually just check at a couple spots. Yep, we're at a 1/2 inch. So it's important to make sure that the pleat is only a 1/2 inch deep, or else the width, the length of your sash will be off. So I'm going to continue to do that same thing that I just did. I'm going to find the next two cut marks. So the first one should be right at the base of where I just pressed. So right there and right there. So I'm going to fold those together, wrong sides together, and kind of repeat that process. So when I bring this back, the next shot, it'll have all of the pleats already completed. Okay, so now you can see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pleats here. So we're not going to sew this down right now. We're going to leave it just like it is. The pleats will be sewn at the very end of the sash construction. But for now, we're pretty much done with this piece. We're going to attach the side sash pieces. So I'm going to construct those, and then I'll be right back. I have both of the sash tie pieces, and I have them stacked on top of each other. I put them wrong sides together because this is a directional fabric. So because there is a dedicated top and bottom to this fabric, I wanted to make sure that I didn't mess up the sash. So I put them, stacked them to where they're wrong sides together. Pinned the pattern piece on, and it just goes right at the end. So the point of the pyramid here, is just going to go right at the end of the sash pieces that you've already cut out. So basically I'm just cutting off these 2 triangles at the end. Okay, so after you have the pieces cut out, you've cut out the angle, you're going to fold the sash right sides together, pin it along the angled edge and all of the long edge. And now I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to sew using a 3/8 inch seam allowance all along the long edge and that angled edge. So I have sewn the sash piece together or along the long and angled edge. I turned it right side out and I've pressed both of them. So now I'm just going to go do a top stitch all along all the sewn edges or folded edges. So the only edge that will not be top stitched is this raw edge at the end. So now we are going to align our sash pieces with the centerpiece. So on the centerpiece, there was a mark on the pattern. Let me grab the pattern piece. Right here, it says align top of sash tie here. So if you didn't make that mark, or if you don't remember, you can always just line it up like that. I learned that with directional fabric, I should have done the angled piece on one end, and then I should have done the angled piece on the other end of the other tie, because when I put them on top of each other, I made it where I cannot align the direction of the pattern correctly. So I'm going to have one tie that's going to be upside down and one that's going to be right side up. So learn from my mistake. If you have directional fabric and it really matters, then you have to do this piece on one end of one sash and on the other end of the other sash. And I'll probably go ahead and write that into the pattern just so that nobody else has that issue. So I'm going to align the top of my sash piece right there where it says to align top of sash here. And I'm going to pin this down. And then I'll go over to the other side and attach the other tie on the other side. So after I pinned the sash pieces in place, I then went over and sewed along the sash piece 1/4 inch in. So it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance right here, just to attach that. Now I'm going to take out these pins on both sides. All right, one side down. Take it on both sides here. And I'm going to move these sash pieces out of the way because I don't want them in the way. What I'm going to do next is fold this whole centerpiece in half. And I'm going to pin all along this long edge. So the next little bit you'll see it'll be pinned along the long edge. So I pinned all along the long edge, and then I denoted a space right here where I'm not going to sew because I'm going to pull these ties out through this opening. So it's kind of like as if we were putting elastic in a waistband. We're going to leave an opening. So just sew along the top edge from the raw edge to the pen, and then from the pen to the other raw edge. We're going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance here. Okay, so I sewed along the long edge, left this opening here, and then I reached through the opening to pull this sash through. So I'm going to pull the sash through the opening until it's even on the side. So I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay, so I pulled the sash through this opening until I made it to the end. And now I'm just flattening this out so you've got the sash tie right there. Just going to make this nice and flat here. I'm going to push this seam allowance either down or up. It really doesn't matter as long as it's the same on both sides of the center sash piece. I'm going to take this to machine and I'm going to sew using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'll do that on this side, and then I will repeat the process on the other side. So after I sewed the ends, I then pulled one side out, and I'm going to pull this other side out of this hole here essentially, and then I'm going to press it all nice and flat. It's now been pressed, so you can see this is the front and here's the back. What we're going to do now, in order to keep all these nice pretty sashes or pretty pleats in place, is I'm going to fold up this top sash, and I'm just going to sew as close as I can without going into the ditch here. I'm going to sew as close as I can to that fold, and I'm going to sew about maybe 80% of the length of the sash. I'm going to do that for each of these pleats. So I'm just going to fold it up a little bit and sew along in here. If we're lucky, by doing that, it will close up the hole we left in the back. So I'm going to take this to my machine, like I said, lift this up and just sew along that crease for all of these pleats. Okay, so you can see just real faintly the stitching that's close to the fold in each of these pleats. This will keep the pleats down. So if I flip this over, you can see here is where my hole that I pulled the sash ties through was. Luckily, my raw edge got caught in one of these stitches, so I don't have to sew anything. But if you wanted to just make it extra secure, you can just do you can by hand with a needle and thread, just do a whip stitch to close this up. I'm not going to because my raw edges are already enclosed, so I don't need to do anything. But if you did not catch the raw edge, then you would need to stitch that closed. I'm just going to give this one more good press and then it will be all done.
Hi, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe.